This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Andy Hirsch. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this episode, we're talking with Andy Hirsch. His new book, Varmints, comes out this Tuesday from 1st Second. But before we get into that conversation, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off at the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you're going to find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off of the cover. And every single month, you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Now, sometimes those specials will be at 45% off of the cover price, sometimes at 50% off of the cover, but often you can find discounts that are more impressive than that.
That's right. And in this episode, we're interviewing writer and artist Andy Hirsch. And if you go to dcbservice.com, you can find several of his works available, including one of the books we talk about, the Baker Street Peculiars, that he did with Roger Langdridge. That is 35% off for $9.74. Plus, you can get multiple volumes of the Garfield comic that Andy has drawn regularly for quite some time. Those are all 30% off and 35% off.
That's right. You can't beat the prices at Discount Comic Book Service when it comes to Andy Hirsch comics and otherwise. So go to their website, dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you. That's right. You know, Andy, as we point out in our interview with Andy Hirsch, Andy and Andy, it gets confusing here. This interview is a long time in coming because we've had him on the show a number of times in the past, but only for brief periods, no more than, let's say, 5-8 minutes at a time. But, yeah, we sat down for the long haul.
Yeah, but, I mean, I think Andy is probably our most frequent guest of all the guests that we've had on multiple times.
Yeah, he and Craig Yo. I'd have to count up the number of times to see who's winning at this point.
Yeah, who gets the Five Timers Club bathrobe and club membership.
Yeah, well, we did have a great time talking about the new book, Varmints. So let's go ahead and get to that.
Yeah, let's listen.
We're pleased to have on the Comics Alternative Andy Hirsch. His new book, From 1st Second, Varmints, comes out this Tuesday, September 27th. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks for being here.
Actually, it's a little off me saying welcome to the podcast because you've been on the podcast multiple times, although they've been, I guess, on location shows either at the local shop that you and I share, or at a con like Heroes Con or something here in Dallas. But this is the first time you've been on the Comics Alternative for a formal one-on-one interview.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. We definitely owe this to you, and what better time than with the release of Varmints?
Perfect.
Well, so this is a new book from 1st Second, but this is not a new story that you're working with, or at least a story world, because you've written about Ned and Opie and their search for Pa in the past.
Yeah, Varmints started out, it's like 5 years ago at this point, as a series of mini-comics that I self-published, just as something to do myself after my the first book I worked on was the Royal Historian of Oz that came out from SLG, and after that, I didn't really have anything lined up. It's one of those things where you hope like, oh, you get your foot in the door, and then it's easy to keep going. You just get one project will lead from the first one. It didn't really happen, so I started Varmints as a way to do my own thing, and over the course of, I guess, a year, a little less than a year, I put out those first 3 issues myself, and some of that material is kind of reused and adapted and fit into this larger story, and then some was just jettisoned entirely.
So in your earlier mini comics, you're dealing with maybe one-off stories, right? That stand alone from the varmints that we get in this new book. Yeah,
those were designed to be able to be read as standalone stories, but kind of have a main through line. And I think that structure kind of carried through to the book because it's still very episodic.
Mm-hmm. Now, because I'm holding in my hands Varmints, the Coonskin Caper.
Oh, yeah, a 24-hour comic I did a few years ago.
Yeah. Now, okay,
I didn't have time to do a full other issue, but I really wanted to do something, so that was that. Yeah, I'd really like to do more of those. It's very labor-intensive putting out a full thing, but if I can convince myself to put out something smaller and looser, then that would be a fun way to revisit the characters between bigger projects.
Mm-hmm. So tell us how this new book and its main characters Ned and Opie is very different from the varmints that we would get in your mini comics.
It's really starting from the same place. The main difference being that I can take advantage of the book length to actually tell a full longer story and let them have their full character arcs. But it's really starting from the same place.
So what is the story of Varmints?
Oh, Opie and Ned are 2 kids making their way across the West in search of their deadbeat pa, who just so happens to be the criminal king of the West.
who everybody already knows as Pa, right?
Right. Everybody knows this mysterious bad guy known as Pa, and he is actually their Pa, which leads to a little bit of confusion and some secrets between the two.
And so with Ned and Opie, their brother and sister, and how would you describe their relationship with each other?
Fraught, in a word. It's not an easy relationship. They find themselves in a tough situation and having to depend on each other or put up with each other more than they would like to, just being on their own as they are. I'm the third of 4 kids, so I know a little bit about trying to get along with siblings, which was kind of the inspiration for wanting to do a story about siblings and how tough that relationship can be. You're very competitive with one another, and you're always trying to put each other down, and you fight, but still you love each other and you feel this sense of responsibility to one another that really makes for what I think is an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
So this is a book that especially younger readers with siblings can identify.
That's the hope.
Well, that leads me into issues of audience here. Now, I was checking out the Varmints page on Amazon, and as you find with every book, there is an age range, grade level, and they say that they list the age range for Varmints as 8 to 12 years and grade levels 3 to 4. Now, is this something that as an artist you had input in designating, or is this something that first second would list?
No, that's first second's decision, or maybe even higher up in Macmillan. I believe that I think they have readers, teachers, librarians who kind of advise on what age range to recommend. I guess I'm not entirely sure about that. I would say it probably skews towards the older end of that. Obie and Ned are meant to be 14 and 10, respectively. Okay. So that was kind of the range I was looking at, when I was creating it. But if younger readers can also find something to enjoy, that's fantastic. It is a Western, so there are guns, there is gambling, there is drinking, not on the part of the kids, of course, but this is kind of the world they exist in. So, unavoidable to some extent.
And that's kind of, in that world you just described, is where we first encounter Opie and Ned in a what appears to be a heated game of cards in a bar that two people of the ages that they are shouldn't be in, right? But that puts us also right into a very clear Western milieu as well.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. They are much younger than the characters that you commonly see associated with the Western tropes. Your gunfights and poker games and everything. So I think it puts that in a little different context, and hopefully is different than the kind of Westerns that people may be expecting. It's very much, there's real danger there, but it's a Saturday morning cartoon, really.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that actually brings up something I wanted to ask you about. Because when I was reading it, I was actually reminded, as I was going through it, of Saturday morning cartoons, and particularly like Warner Brothers cartoons as we go along. Is that something you're influenced by?
A little bit. I certainly, I don't know. There's no way I could wake up as regularly now as I did then to cartoons on Saturday. But, I definitely, I watched everything we could get, even though, we didn't have cable or anything, so options were limited. But I love cartoons. I think one of the things that I most took from that is this level of energy, this high pace that's almost manic, I think, that runs through most of the book. Mm-hmm. And I think that, that kind of comes from just trying to keep the attention of a younger reader. Like, if they get bored, they will not hesitate to drop the book and move on to something else. So by constantly, keeping the action up and introducing new things, new settings, new characters, they move around all over the place in this. Hopefully that keeps readers engaged.
Right, and at times the exaggerated actions, right? And sometimes it could be just a simple action, not necessarily running, but just moving your arm. And pointing that out is very visually stimulating, the way you've drawn that.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. I think, they also, very often in this, you'll find people breaking through panel borders and, limbs going this way and that, as if, hopefully as if the panels can't even contain the amount of energy that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I noticed that while reading it. That's a really effective technique that you use that you use in the book to play around with panel borders and panel shapes as well.
Yeah, it also helps to guide the reader through the panels. Ideally, when I am breaking borders like that, it's only ever touching the panel immediately preceding or immediately after the panel. And that's kind of another nod to being friendly to younger readers is making sure that even though there's so much going on, there has to be that clarity. It has to be easy to follow. It's something I always value in my work, but I think that's kind of a shared value with the audience. So that works out pretty nice.
Andy was mentioning the cartoon aspect of this, or you guys were discussing this. One of the things that this reminds me of, in addition to, let's say, the Warner Brother cartoons, is especially with Chapter 6, with the race at the end, I couldn't help but think of the Wacky Races, right?
Yes.
Where you did you have that in mind as you were drawing your race toward the end?
Oh, entirely. There's all sorts of, there's Wacky Races, of course, but anytime anything like that, pops up, I'll say it, even like the pod racing stuff in the Star Wars prequels, that was an influence. Maybe not even the movie, but God, I played that video game so much. Oh, it's a good one.
Yeah, well, I think that even the Star Wars movies' worst detractors, the Phantom Menace's worst detractors will admit that the pod racing scene is pretty cool.
It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. Isn't not necessarily good, but that part's cool.
I want to get back to the readership and the age issue for a moment, because there are a couple of places in the book where I thought you quite effectively stepped, if not close to the edge, then toward an edge, let's say, of age appropriateness, and then you pulled back almost as a way of providing older readers with a little something more to chew on, right, than the younger demographics that we have listed here, I guess, by the publisher on Amazon. And I'm thinking in particular of Chapter 2, when we're introduced to Dixie. And there's one point where Ned, who is, of the two, the more innocent, and so he's talking with the bartender, and he comments or he questions about Dixie saying something about, are you her boyfriend? And the bartender says, I'm afraid not. And then Ned responds, why not? I'll bet she's got a few gentlemen callers, don't she? And then the two guys at the bar, the two Georges, start laughing. And they get a kick out of both the use of the word in connection to Dixie, gentleman, and a few. And so there's an insinuation there that, this is not Miss Kitty from Gunsmoke, right? That this is someone who, uses her sexuality in ways that some people would think is quite questionable. In other words, more like the actual Old West than the televised Old West. But that's the only place in this text that's mentioned. After that, you pull back. And so there's a hint possibly that something's going on there. But then after this moment, everything we see about Dixie seems to, if not contradict the two Georges' insinuations, then definitely doesn't give him any credence.
Yeah, the Dixie is, to clarify, she's just a waitress, and those two are just awful. They are bad influences that Ned should not be associating with.
But they're fun. And in the pages that follow that scene, I love what you do with their song. You even have them at the top of the pages, like standing on top of the rows of the panels, doing a little dance and singing. And so, that helps to add visually, I think, a sense of melody to what's going on here. Because without that, you wouldn't, I think, as clearly get this sense of fun, of song. But when you see them bopping around as little figures at the top of the page, I think that adds to the humor. It adds to the musical tone you're trying to come across with here.
Thank you. It's tough to communicate music in a comic you don't want to resort to just putting little notes around it, but that visual bopping up and down, like you'd see in a 30s cartoon where just everything is moving.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a way to communicate that rhythm visually.
Yeah, I think readers, potential readers listening should kind of be prepared that for this isn't just a Western; it's a musical, it's a family story, it's a comedy. It's got like you're throwing a whole bunch of genres in there.
It's a good value.
So, and again, I keep coming back to the readership issue. I'm wondering if the kind of story that you're trying to tell here in Varmints, and in a broader sense, the kind of comics that have come to define your career so far, Andy, if you just thought that First Second would be the perfect publisher for you.
Oh, they absolutely are. Their output is uniformly fantastic, and I am just so proud to be a part of that. And my editor, Callista, has just been wonderful to work with, and she has been a longtime champion of Varmints. I sent it to them when just the very first issue was out, and she kept that pitch on her desk and did not throw it out. And, years later, when there was a spot open, she remembered that and she got back in touch. And, it turns out we got along great. And, everyone else there, Danielle, who designed the book, Gina in marketing, the whole team, but they've just been a total joy to work with.
And again, given the kind of books that they tend to do, that most of which seem to appeal to younger readers, it just seemed like a no-brainer that Varmints would come out from First Second.
Yeah, I hope it's a good fit with everything else in it, and I think it is. They put out, I think their all ages material, while appropriate for younger readers, is also of a caliber that hopefully older readers will be able to appreciate as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what Derek was talking about earlier too, with the the stuff with the character Dixie and so on, and some of the other things also, and what you just said there as well, reminds me of that. That's what makes for the best, quote unquote all ages work. One of my fondest memories is watching the Warner Brothers cartoons with my dad, and he would get things in there that were way over my head, like references to Wendell Willkie and stuff like that, and same with like Bullwinkle and Rocky, and then you move in today to the Pixar films, and that's what Pixar does best. So I think this is fitting right in with that. With that tradition of having works that are aimed at children, but also have a lot in there that adults would enjoy.
Thank you. It's good company to be in.
Now, you were describing earlier the format of Varmints is somewhat episodic, and you're right. If you look at the individual chapters, it's almost as if each of them could have been one of your earlier mini-comics that you self-published. When you sat down to really write all of this, to map out the story in the book Varmints, did you think in those terms that each chapter could be something that maybe almost could stand alone, not quite? I mean, there is this kind of interconnectedness among the chapters, but something almost like, comic book issue-like in terms of episodes.
Yeah, my initial outline for the series, I mapped out, more issues than I actually drew when I was self-publishing them. So I knew the full arc of the story, and it was kind of broken down into chunks, as it still is. So that really is a holdover from the earlier iterations, I think.
Now, when you said that you were mapping out the various episodes of your Varmint stories, and when you self-published, you didn't write out all of them. We're getting some of this in the book, but the way that the book ends seems to suggest that we're going to get a bit more of Varmints in the months, years to come.
Well, one way or another, we'll have to see how this one does. But I mean, me personally, I would love to come back to them. Mm-hmm. Whether it happens with another book or whether I just go back to doing my own thing. Whichever way it ends up working out, there's places to go from here. I hope that this is still able to be read as a complete story. That there is an actual ending, but there's more adventures to be had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's you do a good job with that. Not to give away the ending, but to give the book a sense of completeness and closure at the end, while still keeping open enough opportunities for more adventures with these two. And I think that's a particularly interesting and difficult balancing act, because so much of the comic is the dealing with the arc of Ned and Opie's relationship, and how there's this, like you described earlier, the tension and the competitiveness and so on, but also the underlying love. And so when that kind of gets resolved, is there a future for this relationship that will follow up what that resolution looks like, or is the future of this relationship going to be more tension and so on between these two?
I think there's always going to be some sort of tension. It will just change the form that it takes. With the relationship closer, the problem would inevitably become, can they keep it that way?
Yeah.
What could come between them? What could set them back? It's a lifelong relationship between siblings, and it will have its times of stability, but things change. They're at an age where they're both growing older, and there's a lot of changes going on there as well that would certainly affect how they would behave towards and feel about each other. So I think they have a lot of room left to grow. They grow a lot throughout the course of the book, but there's always more to do.
Now, when I was asking you about the possibility of more Varmint stories, I mean, when I finished reading this first volume, and as Andy said, we won't give away what exactly happens at the end, but, I finished it and I thought, okay, there definitely is going to be more Varmints, and that's a good thing. But then hearing your response raised an issue I hadn't even thought of, and that is, well, there probably will be more Varmints. It's just we may not get it in the same format, because this is something that you have to concern yourself with. Is if this is successful, then obviously First Second will want to do this again, but there could be a reason or reasons for First Second not to want to come out with another book anytime soon. But then there are other means of getting that. You could self-publish. But another thing that strikes me is that you have a close tie, or you've done a lot of work with Boom Studios. And Varmints is a property that would definitely fit with Boom. Specifically their, Kaboom imprint, but I think just Boom in general.
Well, it's a creator-owned story, and it could go, wherever I choose to take it. Mm-hmm. But First Second has been such good stewards of it, and have been so, so generous with me in working on it so far that, even if it's years before anything else with Varmints was to happen with them, I don't think I would take it to another publisher. I think I would, I would do more things like the 24-hour comic that you have, little one-off things. I'm going to be working with Forsaken for years to come for sure. Like I've got a couple of things lined up with them, so it would, I got to finish those before I can even really start thinking about doing another Varmints book.
Things that you can't share right now.
Not just yet. Yet.
Well, let's talk about another series of yours that ended not too long ago, and that was the Baker Street Peculiars.
Yeah, that one did come out from Boom.
And now that things have wrapped up with that 4-issue series, what kind of response have you been getting?
Well, the people that read it really seem to like it, and more than that, me, Roger, Fred, we're all very proud of how it came out. It was really a joy to get to work with them, especially Roger, who's been a hero of mine for ages. He's actually tied in a little bit with Varmints because when I was first starting, I was doing this as a self-published thing, just as something for me, looking for places where it might be able to find a home. And Roger was the person who, the person in the industry who I went to for advice. I was like, would you be willing to read this? I really admire your work. Do you have any advice? Just looking for direction at that point, really. Mm-hmm. And he was generous enough to put me in touch with Boom, where I started doing variant covers and then eventually moved on to working on just loads of licensed stuff, especially Garfield. And it wasn't until years later that when he was looking for somebody to collaborate with on another project with them, well, we both had relationships with Boom. He had introduced me to them. He and I had kept up in the meantime. So that actually it all came together just super smoothly.
So what kind of reaction have you been getting from the completion of Baker Street Peculiars?
Oh, I mean, it's been good, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what people have to say when the trade comes out in January. Hopefully, a wider audience will pick it up. Since it was a miniseries, people can be forgiven for trade waiting, especially.
But that's also one that the way that it was written could easily be carried into another story arc, at least.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the idea is ripe for many, many, many stories. But, that's another one with nothing planned right now. Okay. Just gotta wait and see. That's the tough part. It's waiting and seeing.
When I first saw that series announced, and I thought, that your artistic sensibility and Roger Langridge's style, his writing, his humor, and so on, just were such a perfect match. That seemed like a no-brainer.
I thank you. I agree.
In fact, I saw Roger Langridge from a distance last weekend at Small Press Expo, but every time I passed his table, he was talking with someone, so I didn't want to, go up and interrupt. But
if you weren't able to pick up his new Fred the Clown book, The Iron Duchess, you should definitely order it from him if he's still got copies available. I really loved it.
Well, I like Fred the Clown.
Mm-hmm. It's been a while since we've seen more.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, he did one of the first Blackhawk sketches in my Blackhawk sketchbook, and it's one that
really?
It's one that people pause on the most because it's great. It's a great example.
Well, let's talk about some of your other work, especially the stuff that you've done with Boom. I mean, you're one of the big illustrators on the Garfield title, but you've done work with Adventure Time and Regular Show. And how does your work on those titles in any way reflect the kind of work that you're doing with Varmints, or do you see them as quite separate?
Aside from sharing an audience, I suppose they're pretty separate with the licensed books. And for a little bit there, I think I had done something for everything that they were publishing, but they have since scaled out of that. But the licensed books, you're kind of adjusting to try and mimic the style or sensibilities of whatever property it is you're working on. So I think bouncing between all those, you probably can't help but pick up a thing or two. I catch myself drawing Garfield hands now and then on people. It's just, after so many pages, it kind of becomes a part of the whole drawing style. But that's really the main thing I got from working all of those, really. Garfield especially was something that I have read since I was just the littlest, tiniest kid. So I can't even begin to try and figure out how that has affected how I draw, at the very least, just by virtue of the volume that I have both read and drawn.
Well, do you feel that up until recently you, were known as the Garfield guy? In other words, when you would go to a show or when someone recognized your work or you had to, describe the kind of work that you do, I guess it would always be linked in many ways to Boom Studios or Kaboom and Garfield. But do you feel now with Varmints having or about to come out and Baker Street Peculiars being wrapped up the other month, that this has given you kind of a new facet to your artistic identity?
Yeah, I feel like despite having worked in comics for I guess 6 years now, that this is kind of my actual debut as a creator, it's weird to feel that way after doing so much work. But that is, that's really kind of the case. The nice thing about working on stuff like Garfield is that is a title that everyone and their aunt and their uncles and their nieces and nephews, everyone knows Garfield. So for a while there, I like to say I was America's fourth favorite Jim Davis. People would come up, "Are you Jim Davis?" And, well, I'm one of them, I guess.
I don't know, Derek. Did you when we were in Indiana at Purdue together? Did you ever go to Frankfort, Indiana, Jim Davis's home?
I didn't go to his home, but I would drive through Frankfort often.
Is that the Frankfort, Indiana, county museum the two most famous people that lived there were James Dean and Jim Davis. So the museum has a Garfield wing and it has a James Dean wing.
The spectrum of cool, huh?
It also had one of the best antique toy stores I've ever been in, which since sadly closed down.
Oh, bummer. Did you get anything cool while it was there?
Oh, I couldn't afford anything, so it was more like going to a museum.
Ah, that's the trick.
Just looking at the sweet unopened G.I. Joes.
Well, Antique Roadshow will tell you that it's really the packaging that's worth the money.
Now that you mention this, I think the only time I would stop in Frankfurt is once in a while I would go to a restaurant. I think it was a diner there in Frankfurt. But I can't remember the name of it for the life of me. And I probably couldn't find it even if it's still there.
Well, the James Dean Museum they had there was one of the shadiest museums I've ever been in. Basically, it was the movie posters for his 5 movies in different languages. And then there was a picture on the wall that was in a frame with broken glass. And this picture was in somebody's house and apparently fell off the wall the second James Dean was killed. So
that's at the museum?
It's a demonstration of some psychic phenomenon related to that. But that has nothing to do with any of that stuff. But it was one of those, those small Midwestern towns that I always found it fun to explore.
Yeah, I guess that's something to put on the placard, huh?
Yeah. But really it's the Garfield Museum that's worth checking out there.
So you haven't made the pilgrimage up to the Garfield Museum, Hirsch?
No, I would honestly really love to go, though. I wonder if I bet I could still get a tour of Paws. The Paws Inc. headquarters, right?
Yeah.
Oh, at the museum you'd probably get to see all those fun early model Garfields where he's just kind of, his eyes are very tiny and he's a lot meaner looking.
Yeah, that's right. But also there was a surprising amount of U.S. Acres stuff, which I don't know if you all know. U.S. Acres,
yeah, absolutely.
The short-lived spin-off.
Mm-hmm. The segments would run during the Garfield and Friends show.
Oh, really? So there was a cartoon too?
Yeah, it was kind of like sandwiched in between Garfield, sections. That's when you'd go get more cereal.
So, Andy, what kind of signings and promotion are you going to be doing for Varmints? And I asked that question knowing of one thing you're going to be doing.
Knowing full well that I will be in your neck of the woods. I will be doing in the immediate future, next week, or I guess the September 28th, I'm going to be at the newly renamed Valhalla Comics in Plano, Texas. That'll be my hometown signing, and then later in October, the 22nd and 23rd, I will be down in Austin doing signings at Austin Books and Comics and the book people down there.
That's great.
That's the extent of the tour so far.
But you did have I think a reader's uncorrected proof of Varmints at HeroesCon, right? Or maybe it was a finished copy.
Oh, it was the very first finished copy that arrived in my mail like the week before, and I just had to bring it so I could show all my buddies. It's like, look, it exists. It's actually here.
Great.
I have all these minis that I printed and stapled myself, that I photocopied for free when I was a substitute teacher. But look at this one.
Now, one of the things I always found a highlight of seeing you at a show was the different kind of experimental, like special works you would do, like the flashlight comic and the comic that's shaped like a cube, which I actually keep on my desk in my office at school. So and it gets a lot of comments when people see it.
Awesome.
But is there anything else along those lines that you're either working on or thinking about?
Oh, I'd really love to have something ready for next con season. Not anything concrete to say, but that is still definitely an interest of mine, and something that it has been too long since I've put out a new one.
Mm-hmm.
So you still do want to take the time to do the more craft comics project that's not just a mini comic that you draw, photocopy, staple, and then offer.
Absolutely. It's very relaxing to just be a one person assembly line and put those things together. Even the photocopied and stapled minis are just so satisfying to make. The chunk of that long arm stapler. It's my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I really like about those two particular works that I mentioned is that they make such great like show and tell opportunities when I teach a comics class to kind of give students a sense of some of the the boundaries, how far the boundaries can be pushed of comics. And so I'm equipped in my classrooms with a document camera that I can then put up on the big screen. So unfolding the cube in front of them or showing them how the flashlight comic works up on a big screen in the classroom is a lot of fun.
Oh, that's so cool. They're so labor intensive to make that they're very small print runs. So it makes me really happy to know that there are still people getting to read them for the first time.
Yeah, especially if I can share them that way, because I'm not letting them touch them. You got to be kidding me.
Well, you mentioned that you don't have any Varmint stories planned for the immediate future, but what are you working on now that you can share with us?
Right now, well, there's the Baker Street trade coming out in January, and I actually have just wrapped up my next book for First Second that I think is going to be announced in the next month or so, and I'm actually just now getting started on the one after that. Publishing is weird. It's so far in advance. It's like, I'm working on something that won't be out for 2 years, and it'll be a year until I can talk about it. It's coming from a background in, not just self-publishing, but monthly comics where there's a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month turnaround, and things are announced immediately. That's been one of the strangest things for me about working on Varmints, because it's been since this time last year when I finished working on it, and rather than going down to the printer and having things ready the next day, it's a full year. It's to be separated from something that you spent so long on, and then all of a sudden to have it be once again the topic of your conversations is a little surreal, and will take some getting used to for sure.
Yeah, so you can't tell us much about the one that'll be announced soon, but I know you told me off mic what that could be, and let's just say that this is exciting. Oh
man, I'm so excited for it. That's the thing. I'd love to talk about it, but I can't. It's very exciting though, and I'm sure I will have plenty of chances to get to talk to you about that one.
Well, it's not as if I won't see you anytime soon. I plan on being there this Wednesday.
Ah, thanks. I'll be happy to see you.
In fact, I'm going to bring my copy of Varmints for you to sign.
Excellent. Do a little drawing in there for you too.
All right. Well, Andy, we want to thank you for sitting down with us for our first long-form one-on-one conversation, even though you've talked with us on the show before. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks for joining us, Andy. So that was fun. We got to talk to Andy about Varmints, his newest book, along with Baker Street Peculiars, and some about his work on Garfield and other projects that he has worked on and is going to be working on.
That's right. And he was trying his best to tease as ambiguously as possible this at least one project that's going to be announced in the next month. So all we can say is, listeners, it is going to be great, so keep your ears open for that. But in the meantime, make sure that you grab your copy of Varmints and also pre-order your copy of the trade paperback, Baker Street Peculiars. And I know of a place where you can get a great discount on Baker Street Peculiars, and that's Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, and you'll find that book you can pre-order for 35% off the cover price. But you can also find other Andy Hirsch illustrated comics at the same discounted price, 35% off. So you can't beat the prices of Discount Comic Book Service. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you thought about our interview with Andy Hirsch. If you go to the website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message through SpeakPipe, which is really easy to use. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
That's right, or you can get a hold of us by email. We are 2guys@comicsalternative.com. Or you can get a hold of us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com.
And I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com.
And we also have our Twitter feed where we announce new content to the podcast as well as updates to the blog. You can check out our Twitter feed at the number 2 Guys with PhDs.
That's right. You can also find us on other areas of social media such as Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And if you're an Android user, on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and the comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, comicsalternative.com.
That's right. All the ways to get a hold of us and let us know how we're doing.
That's right. And we have more fun interviews in the weeks to come, so be sure to keep your ears open for those. And until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.